Welcome everyone. My name is Sarah Schoonmaker. I'm the artistic director here at Stone Quarry Art Park. I'm very excited that you are all attending the first of our new Thursday evening series, Stone and Scratch. The park's the series will take place throughout the summer in the park's historic Hilltop House. Each month we pair artist talks and performances with seasonal small plates and wine served inside Dorothy and Bob Reister's mid-century artist-designed home. I would like to thank Sherry Skinner and the Maurer Family Foundation for sponsoring these events, and to Patty Christasis, for her work to make this house feel activated again. Patty is our 2025 Hilltop House Fellow. So please welcome Patty. And Patty will be giving a talk next month for another lovely occasion of the Stone and Scratch series. I would also like to thank all of the members of the Dorothy and Bob Giving Circle for their meaningful support and continued commitment to the art park in the memory of Dorothy and Bob. And thank you to the National Trust, the New York State Council on the Arts, and the Gorman, Reisman, John Ben Snow, and community foundations for supporting the effort to rehabilitate the Hilltop House and studio. And thank you to our board and advisory committee members that weighed in and helped guide the removal of the ash trees and conversion to meadow of this historic and epic view and history landscape, which you all have now viewed.
Yeah, bravo.
And I'd also like to thank, I love thanking people, all of the attendees, the artists, the amazing professional singers who you will hear sing in the landscape, and for giving this new programming idea a try with us. And I'd like to thank From Scratch for the amazing food, Caroline and Anna. And it's a very, very special time. Emily Zangel, Stone Quarry's executive director, had a baby girl yesterday morning. Polly Lucille Zangel. So Emily can't be with us because she's busy. And I'm so pleased to introduce 2025 visiting artist Patrick McGuan. Another very, yes. Emily and I are both having really big years. About a year and a half ago, former teaching artist Grace Otten said to me, Sarah, do you know Patrick McGuan? He's a very good artist and he would be very fitting in your visiting artist program. I wrote Patrick an email, we met for a coffee. Patrick's work deals with language and the meaning we ascribe to landscapes and bodies. And I told him about the project of the restoring the view shed and the ash trees. And so he became a visiting artist, and subsequently we fell in love. So we're getting married. Just a lot of things. I always like to share. I am also a practicing artist. And I believe in art, and I say this over and over again, but art making as a discipline, as a form of creating knowledge and questions, is a deeply connective and associative practice, and it brings disparate people of disparate backgrounds together. And in this case, with Patrick, we'll talk about his project here, at the park it usually means disparate people coming together and standing in a field to co-create art. So in this case, it was highly connective. I shouldn't, we're on a timetable, I'm not gonna talk anymore. Patrick McGuan, wonderful artist, my sweetheart lover.
I don't really know how to follow an introduction such as that, except with puppies. It is really convenient. This is Edith. She's a blue heeler mix that I adopted about 3 years ago. She's willful and intuitive and relates to my art practice because if you look at the books that she's chosen to annotate, we've got Ceremony by Alyssa Silico and the Collected Stories of Priest T.J. Pancake. In both of those, the past threatens to foreclose on the future. The present is swimming in ghosts, and the landscape is as much a character as any human. So she serves as an excellent introduction. My purpose is my studio work has a persistent relationship to language, and I can't make sense of being alive and being American without ghosts and the flow of words from the past. This is a Shaker seed stand. The Shakers were a religious separatist community that were I guess at this point are mostly remembered for their functional work. They didn't make decorative art. Functional art was the highest form that art could take. And the maxim that they used was that every force evolves a form. And I think that every force evolves a form is perhaps the most capacious definition of sculpture that I've found. And this is a Shaker this is a bench for a meeting house for worship services. And you can see that it's just perfectly tailored to its function. A regular old bench would have lateral supports, but because of the way this was used in worship, and because of the way that they would carefully lift and reposition it, always grabbing from the same point, it did not need those supports. Also, you can see the Shaker sisters really had the best bonnets in the game. My apologies to any Mennonites in the audience. And for a while, I've been saying that my work is about the way that language and ideology is grafted onto bodies and landscapes. And this piece here is called Night Vigil, Flint to Gary. And let's see, so I built a sign that says moths, similar to the one you've seen in a TV studio that says applause, and I wired it to hook onto the battery terminals in my pickup truck. And so this was photographed starting at sunset in Flint, Michigan, and at different points along the way to Gary, Indiana by sunrise. Go ahead, but please. And, well, I guess technically I teach sculpture, so I probably should have credentials, but thanks.
I didn't announce any of your credentials,
sorry. No, that's fine, I actually have no degree in sculpture. So I'm a fiber girl. Thank you. So going back to the maxim of every force evolves a form, how does this relate to, a performance with a light that lives only as photographs? When I consider the Rust Belt and the industrial agricultural American Midwest, the force and the form that matches is one of erosion and disappearance. I think the Midwestern landscape is still beautiful, it's still volatile, but it holds a heavy sort of weight in the wake of American expansion. It's astounding to me to stand in a field and realize that 150 years ago, passenger pigeons would black out the sky in just a river of wings. And, this is Gary, Indiana at sunrise. The other thematic thing happening here was, if this sign attracts moths, it is through no function of the text itself, it is just by virtue of the light. And to me, that linguistic failure seemed to be a better way to embody rather than describe the loss that's attendant to the forming rust belts. I'm going to quote a handful of writers, and this is Gertrude's sign up here. I'll get to her in a second, but when I was working on the piece with the moth sign, I kept thinking of the quote from William Faulkner's As I Lay Dying, where old man looking back at an unhappy marriage says, he had a word for that too. He called it love. And that was when I learned that words weren't no good, just a shape to fill a lack. But I did a handful of pieces driving across the Midwest, and as one does driving across the Midwest, my thoughts went to Gertrude's time. Gertrude Stein recounts in Everybody's Autobiography, which is her narrative of touring the US after spending 20 years as an expatriate in Paris. Her most profound experience of the American landscape was flying in a plane from New Jersey to Chicago, looking out the window and seeing in the Jefferson grid a series of cubist canvases. Can you click ahead, please? Yes, this is what she saw. She said, "It was all a pleasant matter, but most of all, the looking down and finding it a real America. Straight lines in quarter sections, and the mountain lines in Pennsylvania very straight lines. It made it right that I had always been with Cubism and everything that followed after." So when I first heard that story, it was, freshman art history survey, and the tenor around it was like, wow, modernist paintings and Oracle. But driving through, it was Nebraska this time, that quotation of, "I had always been right to be with the Cubists," looking down at the American landscape seemed sinister. And well, I bookmarked it, and as soon as I had an address, I went to my local library and dug up a history book and realized that Gertrude Stein had actually been touring the US, flying over the US during the worst period of dust bowl storms in American history. So as she is up in the air congratulating herself, the earth is literally rising up in revolt. Gertrude Stein, her approach to modernist language or modernist poetry was not that her work was necessarily about something, it was, it's more like an exploded parts diagram of how language operates and creates meaning and how it breaks down again. And this was largely inspired by the new industrial age. Looking at words as interchangeable little units, which matches the Jefferson grid, which is it's the name we give to the Land Ordinance of 1785, which was Thomas Jefferson's Age of Reason solution for surveying and bounding the new frontier into interchangeable units for speculation and soil. So Hildegard Johnson, who is by no means the first Hildegard, or by no means the last Hildegard we'll encounter, wrote a history called Order Upon the Land, and she said the less men knew about the land, the straighter were the lines they drew, right across rivers and mountains. So Gertrude Stein was touring the US when the Black Sunday dust storm of 1935 dredged up more earth from southern Kansas and the Oklahoma Panhandle than American engineers moved for the Panama Canal. And then this quote from Donald Worcester, Tapestry of Change, Nature and Culture on the Prairie. He said, "The grid was not designed to develop slowly in place as tradition responded to environment over time, nor was it the finely balanced outcome of many local decisions interacting with shifting flow of water, the patchiness of soil, the movement of organisms. Instead, it was arbitrary, abstract, and imperial. The open prairie was everywhere vulnerable to its rule. The plow quickly followed the surveyor's lines. Hundreds of millions of straight furrows were cut across the grassland weave. The sound of ripping filled the air. A rich odor of exposed earth rose from the furrows. Long accumulating fertility fed a new agriculture. The land yielded to wind and water, with Iowa losing half its topsoil in its first century and a half of settlement." And again, there is Gertrude Stein, congratulating herself on being right. And, this would eventually filter into my studio practice, but I needed one more ghost of a wordsmith. So this is Townes Van Zandt. He is a country singer that was talented and troubled in about equal measure, and, well, notorious for the second half of that. There's a great documentary about Townes called Be Here to Love Me, and to sort of establish that Townes could be unwell, they play this fun conversation between Townes and his road manager. It goes something like this. It says, "Let me tell you, what about the other one I'm writing? Boy, my hand doesn't work fast enough. It's going to be nothing but names of birds. It's going to start off with bluebird, and then something else, another bird, another bird, another bird, verse, maybe a bridge, then another verse, and a bridge, nothing but birds. And the last chorus, I think, will be in Latin." And you hear his manager say, like, "Oh, well, what's it going to be about?" And Tom says, "Birds." You hear the sort of defeated manager say, "Oh, birds. Oh, I love this conversation because it really hits on the difference between subject and content. That somewhere someone is hoping that a song that is made up of nothing but bird names is somehow not about birds. This body of work is called Lyric, and sort of in the foreground you can see a section that I call Flying V, and it looks something like an altar rail, and then these light forms are ceramic slip casts of taxidermy goose forms. Then this one in the back is called As Long as There Are Sundowns, There Will Always Be the West. And I imagined it as halfway between a country western guitar top and John Ford's Sandpiper and Boss Sunset. Here we've got some close-ups. If you look closely at the bird forms, they have a sort of speckled glaze on them that looks a little bit like a goose egg, and then there's mottled grass on there. And it feels like it toggles between scales of being both an egg, a bird, and then an aerial landscape. I would say a big part of how I've approached work since starting this was the poetics of it, how it starts to make sense, how it starts to fall apart. And Lyric was very much about partial connections. That it's kind of walking through a room, picking something up, picking another thing up, and saying, these almost fit, but do not quite. Picking something else, almost fit, but does not quite fit. So the geese are a flying V. A flying V is a kind of guitar, but neither are exactly that. There's a poet essayist named Fanny Howe who wrote a tremendous essay called Bewilderment about that theme in lyric poetry. It says, one definition of the lyric might be that it is a method of searching for something that can't be found. It is an air that blows and buoys and settles. It says, not this, instead of, I have it. And then this piece, also part of lyric, is called False Cognate. So it is silk roses hanging from a section of crown molding that I just attached to the wall wherever it goes. My apologies to the preparators. And hidden inside the piece is an essential oil diffuser that releases the aroma of honeysuckle. So I was trying to create a sensory experience akin to a linguistic false cognate. An example might be that in Italian, burro means butter, but in Spanish it means donkey. So I described this as being about the space between subject and content. There's the town's fancy song, nothing but bird names. And sort of the question at the back of this work is, what is left of the American landscape? What is left of the frontier when it is, what is left of the landscapes of the frontier? The idea of the frontier is perpetually rewriting. And I think of these bird forms as being something like words, but not strung together in a sentence or not conjugated. I think in moments of grief and affliction, we lose the ability to make meaning. That a word becomes just a static form without the connective tissue to put it into motion. And quoting from Joy Williams here, she said, "It was as if for Jane that dreadful moment had come of which the Kabbalah speaks, when words rebel against us and become only themselves, dead as stones." And so I had that conversation also laid out as a roadmap. They're free to take. This is up at the Schweinfurth Art Center in Auburn, New York right now. If you want a map, go and get it, they're free. On the back of the map are quotations pulled from writers, poets, theorists, kind of an artist statement that I myself did not write. I imagine my work as pulling strands from different texts and weaving them together in a way that these voices move between harmony and dissonance. I've set up, I guess, a series of polarities and how I want work to operate. I ask myself, what is the difference between work that is something versus work that is about something? What is the difference between work that describes versus work that embodies or manifests? How can work dissolve instead of resolving? And what is the difference between what the work is about and how it's about it? And ultimately, I'm looking for work that is not telling you something, but something to be with you. The current body of work I've got going is called In the Dry. Some of that is up at the Schweinfurth Art Center, and then this piece that you'll see tonight as well. And In the Dry is looking at both the American relationship to the landscape and how our current relationship is largely the inheritance of the sort of apocalyptic and utopian strands of Puritanism that landed on these shores. So I have here a painting by Edward Hicks called The Peaceable Kingdom. He made 70-some paintings like this. It was kind of his thing. The illusion of the lion lying down with the lamb, or the wolf lying down with the lamb, comes from the book of Isaiah. In the colonial days, there was both the puritanical logic of dominion, that the earth belonged to us to do with as we saw fit, and also this utopian strand that the New World was a site of millennial peace. Digging into this history seems a way to make sense of our current moment, which feels like a simultaneous creation and dissolution. At the fringes of religious expression, I think Shakerism and the mysticism of medieval female monastics offer alternatives to the puritanical logic of D&B. Shakercraft and spiritual gift drawings, along with Hildegard von Bingen's visionary cosmology, hold space for the divine as something green, growing, and feminine, in counterbalance to our inherited moment. They frame labor as worship and proffer interdependence and caregiving in place of individuality. So In the Dry is weaving together all of these thoughts and histories. So these are illuminations from Hildegard's second Hildegard of the day, her manuscript Liber Civius. And she experienced her visions as flames pouring into her eyes and told her next door neighbor about them. The Shakers, in the early days of the sect, made what they called gift drawings, which were not authored but revealed to the Shaker sisters and illustrated some sorts of spiritual principles. They're gorgeous. Some of them are apocalyptic. Some of them are about spiritual fruits and growth. And remember, these are beautiful, but they are not art. They are spiritual instruction. Don't you dare appreciate this as art. So this piece is called Summer and Winter. Perhaps at this scale you can tell that it forms the image of an overshot weaving draft. When you get close, it turns, well, if you put some time and attention into the text, you can see that it spells out, for if they do these things when the wood is green, then all shall be done in the dry, which is taken from the book of Luke when Christ is being led to the crucifixion. I wanted this work to simultaneously operate as material, as image, and as text, but also none of those. And if you get close enough, sorry, you can go forward one more time, you can start to see the chunkiness of the whiteout correction fluid and the typewriter ribbon, the words, scatter and fall apart. This is directly inspired by the sort of spiritual revelation of medieval female monastics. So here's another kind of quote. Not a kind of quote. It is a quote from Elvia Wilk. She says, if mystical encounter entails a sort of spiritual transmission, the body of the mystic is the medium that registers the message. The body is the primary site of inscription. This inscription is non-transferable. The body must be read in order for its knowledge to be translated as best as possible into writing. Therefore, bodies, inner and outer, material and spiritual, become text. In turn, the resulting written corpus must be brought alive to become like the body it's meant to resemble. In Christianity, this twin becoming of text and body parallels Christ's incarnation, whereupon God's word was made flesh. And this is from the Metropolitan Museum of Art. I dearly love it. Some nuns made an altar cloth, and it is all white work. The material is the image is the material. And we got some more medieval illuminations. So, sticking with the theme of female monasticism, around the 13th century, the Christ side wound takes a remarkable 90-degree turn to become the Arma Christi, the disembodied wound. It's often represented as a sort of vulva, and it becomes a site of injury and intimacy for the devotees. Julian of Norwich had a vision of climbing into the side wound of Christ. Catherine of Siena had a vision of drinking from the side wound of Christ, and then people who had these books of hours were instructed to caress the wound of Christ. Then this piece called Memoration, and from a distance it looks like a grandfather clock and a TV playing kind of staticky videos. The clock suspiciously does not have hands or a face. And the TV plays videos of startling murmurations. So, hidden inside the clock is analog broadcast equipment that's playing the video. So as one moves through the space, it makes the video phase in and out of static. Also, I was teaching metal sculpture this semester, so I always dressed like an old-timey railroad engineer. And so you can see the analog TV antenna inside the clock case. And if you look at the door, that is two pieces of ash that have been joined right where the torn edge of the bark is that reveals the tunnels left behind by the emerald ash borer that is gradually destroying ash trees in North America. And so I got this opportunity to work between Stone Quarry Art Park and the Schweinfurth Art Center in Auburn, New York, and I knew that I wanted to do something with setting this hillside on fire, and I wanted a way to graft the landscape of Stone Quarry onto the walls of the Schweinfurth. And so I thought about Hildegard's fiery visions, and I also remembered St. Clair on her deathbed had a vision of the Mass projected up on the walls of her cell. And so you can click. Thank you. This was the first set of fires at Stone Quarry. We set these over my spring break, and they are laid out in a sort of skewed grid that follows the throw of the camera lens. And the photo credit here goes to Ellery Bryan. Can you click ahead if you would? And what Sarah said about art at its best being a bunch of strangers showing generosity out in the field. Well, we weren't all strangers, but this took a tremendous amount of hands to pull off. And after we lit the fires and took the first shot, they started to die down. And Sam Gilbart, who was a fire ecologist working with us, said, well, if you shake the hay out over the fires, they're going to flare back up. And I don't know who decided that the term for this hay shaking would be floofing, but we went ahead and floofed the fires and then ran out of frame really quick. And so this is just a small portion of the people who were involved with this. We have Sam Gilbart, a fire ecologist, Ellery Bryan, filmmaker, Andy Vanderyacht, also a fire ecologist, Sayard Schoonmaker, artist, artistic director, Dea Guy-Bassan, artist, technician at Syracuse University, Carl Voss, artist, MFA student, and Julia Wilson, artist, visiting artist.
2025 visiting artist.
Yeah.
Stay tuned, everyone.
Masters of Landscape Architecture. So, of the people here, not everyone knew everyone else. They were strangers and they were friends, and it was just a really great and a friendly experience. So this is the piece, or half the piece of that, the Schweinfurth. So these are cyanotypes that are sewn together like a quilt top, and I think the dimension is about 44 by 60 inches. So that's the other one. And these are two views onto the same subject, but in the Art Center they are up on opposite walls as a perspective crosses in the viewer's body. I sure hope you remember what Fanning House said about bewildered poetry, because there's something remarkably similar in mystical experience. So this is Elvia Wilk again. Says, mystical texts like Julian's and Angela's are often repetitive, contradictory, circular. They breathe and they beat. Reading them is interactive. It requires, as religion scholar Amy Hollywood has suggested, a sort of radical absorption on the part of the reader to mirror the self-annihilation attempted by the author. Tonight, There will be choral performers singing compositions by Hildegard of Bingen and from the Sacred Harp Hymnal. Sacred harp hymns are often named after biblical cities. They're also named after the American towns where they were composed, and oftentimes American towns are named after biblical cities. In their original settings, both of these styles use the sonic force of reverberation off the stone walls of a convent or the hard floors and walls of country churches to create an embodied spiritual experience. You hear the voice of the worshipers, you hear the sound of the room. Tonight, you'll hear the silence of the sky and the space of the hillside, woods, and meadow along with the singers. The way that I describe the poetics in my art and these strains of mysticism is irrational, and that is to the point. Love and optimism are irrational, but when I consider the results of Western rationalism, what other choice is there? Thank you so much.